Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'm Professor David Avery. I'm the chair of the Arts and Sciences Department, and I'm pleased to bring to you tonight this Holocaust Remembrance Ceremony. The ceremony is organized by Adjunct Professor Dr. Heidi Omlor. Dr. Omlor has both a master's degree and a PhD in Holocaust and Genocide Studies. She's traveled several times to Europe to authentic sites of the Holocaust in the Czech Republic, Poland, Germany, France, Spain, and Portugal. She is currently working on publishing her dissertation, which is entitled The Holocaust, Front Page News in Maine. Now I'd like to turn the program over to Professor Omlor and allow her to educate us about the Holocaust Remembrance Program. Heidi.
You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Dr. Avery. Good evening, everyone. Today we gather to commemorate Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day. It's a day to stop and remember the victims of the Holocaust, to read their names and remember. The remembrance ceremony this evening has two parts. The first part is a name reading ceremony. We will read the names of individuals, 24 individuals, who perished at the hands of the Nazis. They will be remembered one by one. In the second part of the ceremony, we will have the privilege of hearing from Holocaust survivor Charles Rotmil. Reading names of men, women, and children killed by Nazi Germany and its collaborators is a simple and powerful way to remember these individuals. Victims of the Holocaust do not have a grave, and so in that way, reciting their names in any given community allows for them to be memorialized. To remember these people as human beings, as individuals, who have a life story, who had a history. It is meant for us to understand this happened to people like us. It happened one by one. It happened gradually. And also to remind us of the dignity of each of these individuals, and that we restore their memory by this simple act of reading their name. Thank you.
And now we'll begin that reading of names. I will start. Helen Katz. Henny Sherman.
Judith Schwed, Adolphe Rotmil.
Rachel Beck, Frederick Dermer.
Marcus Fink and Eva Heyman.
Sarah Kwan and Max Rosenblatt.
Joseph Wilk, Abraham Wise.
Thomas Kuka, Nellie Adler.
Hennick Cornfield, Marcus Fass.
Bertha Adler, Joseph Ghani.
Franco Cesana, and Laura Wasserberger.
Sari Goldstein and Jan Peter Pfeiffer.
Louis Levy, Frida Listener.
Thank you very much. The United States Congress established the days of remembrance as the nation's annual commemoration of the Holocaust and created the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum as a permanent living memorial to the victims. May 8th was the 78th anniversary of the end of World War II, known as VE or Victory in Europe Day, the day that officially ended the Holocaust and when Allies accepted the unconditional surrender of Nazi Germany. So why, more than 70 years later, are we commemorating and remembering on this day? Today, we remember those who were left without a voice, and we acknowledge those voices that are still able to speak, to allow them to share their stories. We also continue to speak up for those who are still being persecuted and killed because of their beliefs, because of the color of their skin, because they are different. By remembering the victims of the Holocaust, we defy the Nazis' attempt to dehumanize and destroy the Jewish people. We remember the history of the Holocaust as a history of individuals, and this in itself is an act of resistance. Now that we have remembered victims of the Holocaust, it is my great pleasure that I get to introduce to all of you, my Maine Maritime community, someone who survived the Holocaust. My dear, dear friend, Charles Rotmil, hidden child of the Holocaust, is going to speak to us this evening. Here's Charles. You're all set.
Hi, everyone. It's an honor to be speaking with you today. It's important that people like me speak about what happened so we won't forget and history won't repeat itself. I'm a witness, and I say this to begin with, that I'm not just a historian. I was there, and I was known as a hidden child. It's a whole group of people. We meet annually, all the hidden children that were hidden during the war. I don't live in the past lives in me. My brother used to tell me, "Don't you stop harping on this, you're living in the past." And I said, no, I don't live in the past lives in me, it's inside. the great quotation here. You know, first it came for the socialist. I did not speak out. I wasn't a socialist. Then they came for trade unions. I did not speak out. I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews. And I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. Pastor Neil Moeller, great quote. A lot of us went into hiding as Jews were being rounded up for deportation, a result of the final solution. There were many rescuers. Père Bruno Renders, a monk from the Abbey of Mont César, was among them. I was one of the 400 children that he saved. I was born in Strasbourg, France. I can't point to it, but you can see it's right along the river, dividing Germany from France. And because of that, I was bilingual. I spoke French and German. In my house, we spoke German and sometimes Yiddish also, which is a version of German. It's sort of a slang of German. It's true, memories are very fragile. They're like spider webs. You walk too fast, you break them. I've said that. Veils have to be pushed aside. Our minds are the cameras, and that's what happens to me. Even every day, you'll get memories, scenarios of things that of past. And Santayana said, those who can't remember the past are condemned to relive it. Very important that we look at the past. If history repeats itself, we learn from experience. Why is the world the way it is? That was George Bernard Shaw who said that. Even early on, Hitler, up there in that little window, had incredible charisma, and he was an incredible speaker. Even to this day, I'm very wary of any political speeches because they can mesmerize you and hypnotize you. And he had tremendous ability to do that. Even the New York Times, when the New York Times cost 2 cents, in 1933, there were headlines. It's not like the world didn't know. German fugitives tell of atrocities. I look at this paper, which you can find in the library, and I'm astounded at how much was reported about the time. Jews flee persecution. And even these images of public hangings of a girl who was 16 years old, because they were part of the underground. These are people who work against the Germans underground, and they executed her. This is my family, around 1936 in Metz. I was born in 32, so I'm 4 years old there. It's my father, Adolphe, spelled Edolphe, my sister, Henriette, my mother, Dora, Dorothy, and my brother, Bernard. And my sister, Henriette, in a cart that I remember riding in, a go-kart, when my brother pushed me down a hill and I lost total control of the car. It scared me. I put this picture here is of a Jewish wedding, but I am trying to show what it was like when we had dinners. We would dine around the table and the meals were always festive. We had songs, particularly around the holidays, like Passover. We just had this recently. And where the home becomes a temple. Just about the time I was born, Hitler was made Chancellor of Germany. he became the head of Germany. And again, the New York Times reports it. Hitler in power. He's been lurking in the shadows for years before this. There's Hitler is in the middle, and there's cabinet, and you have Goering, who was Prime Minister of Propaganda. That's his title. And he's the one who's known to say, make the lie big enough and they'll believe you. And then Julius Streicher was an anti-Semitic, and he says, Julius Streicher spricht über die Juden in unserer Unglück, speaks to the people about the Jews, they are our misfortune. This is the kind of propaganda that used to be all over the place. Not just Germany, but eventually Belgium and France and all the countries that Germany invaded. Germany listened. Deutschland hört der Führer. Germany hears the Führer on the radio. There he is with the swastika, which is actually an old Indian symbol of the rising sun. Then this was the book burning that Hitler had ordered. The Germans took certain books, great writings, and burned them in a giant fire. All over the country, they were doing this big burning of books. There's a Hasidic Jew, which is a religious Jew, being paraded around and humiliated. Hitler, very, very charismatic, powerful. He had a powerful effect over people. The crowd, can you imagine? The crowd while Hitler was speaking, this is what he saw. This is from the Heidelplatz of Vienna. There he is, very, very powerful. I don't know if there are videos where you can see Hitler speak. It's worth watching. Tremendous hypnotic power. There's a total devotion, a particular German parade with the flags and everybody saluting. It was a salute that was invented by Mussolini, actually, raising the arm like that. It became very well known as the Hitler salute. There's Hitler from the back talking to people in Vienna. And these were propaganda and caricatures making fun of Jews. Mordecai would be a caricature to make fun. And then Karl Marx was a Jew, you see. Communism, it's a Jewish trait. Now, this is Chagall painting of a religious Jew. It's a real painting, but then from this they made a caricature of the wandering Jew, and his right hand, he has all the money in the world, the gold pieces. So that's how, this kind of anti-Semitism still goes on, where even Rockefeller one time said that the Jews have all the money in Wall Street. This kind of lies that occur, that's not true. And here's a drawing I found at Bowdoin College of a teacher teaching a child about how to identify a Jewish nose. And they try to make it seem as if that was a particular trait. You tell people something like that and you believe it. You can't. You have to really doubt everything you see. You have to question everything you hear and doubt everything you see. And then they even had Sigmund Freud on the bottom, to depict what a Jewish nose looks like, and the Rosenbergs on top. In 1938, I was now 6 years old. We moved to Vienna. We were living in Paris before that. And we stepped in the mouth of the wolf because in November 11, 1938, Hitler annexed Austria. And then they had Kristallnacht, which is the night of broken glass. It's called Kristallnacht because they wanted you to think that the Jews were so rich that they used crystals in the windows, not glass, which is a lie also. But I remember that night, the next morning, my sister and I walked around Vienna and we saw the glass, the broken windows from the stores that belonged to Jews. This is how Vienna looked when they were welcoming Hitler with open arms. In the background, you can see the Ferris wheel that I used to go on. And the Riesenrad, it's still there. And that in the movie The Third Man with Orson Welles is filmed in that. Yeah, there's a scene in there where they are fighting inside one of those cabins. But each cabin would hold like 12 people. And the area is called the Prater, which is an amusement park. And these were the children who were hypnotized by propaganda and were very enthusiastic about Hitler and cheering him on. But they're innocent, those children. They don't know they're being mesmerized by a monster. Ja means yes in German. That was one of the propaganda things. And again, the Hitler salute. Then came the attack on the Jews. Cafe Rembrandt is a cafe that my father would hang out in, and they used the Jewish symbol of the Jewish star, the Mogen David, as an insult, and write the word Jew, Yud. It's strange. It doesn't say anything derogatory, but it becomes derogatory the way it's used. But the Mogen David is really a symbol of the triangle going up is fire and the triangle going down is water. So it's sort of a miraculous symbol where you're combining water and fire. Even at times, Nazis smashed, loot, and burned Jewish shops until Goebbels caused a halt. Very well reported. I happened to be in Vienna at the time, and saw this. And then my father was arrested. These brown shirts came to our apartment and attacked him and took him away. The prisoners were forced to scrub the road, the streets. And what they were robbing was, sometimes they rubbed down things about Jews, but also Österreich, meaning Austria doesn't exist anymore. It's not German. When Germany annexed Austria. And then people tried to leave. We were among them. We got a visa to leave, and we left Vienna. And then I still have this passport. That's my father's passport. Arthur Benjamin Rotmil, meaning the son of Benjamin. That's my father's passport. I gave it to the Jewish Museum here at the Holocaust Museum in Maine. They have it. It's the only memorabilia that I have of my father. Oh, God. You pick that up? Yeah, hang it up, hang it up. Okay, I'm sorry, the telephone rang. Now, we stayed in a place called Marnef, which was a community It was a community that we lived in for a long time with about 300 other refugees. It was very, very peaceful. But then when Poland was invaded, the beginning of World War II began. We went on the road. Germany attacks Poland, cities bombed. And then they started invading Holland and Belgium. And when the Germans came close, they tried to defend themselves, but they have no power. So we joined a throng of people and we went on the road. And while on the road, we walked very much like that photograph that I found, just like that. And airplanes, the Stuka, would come down to strafe us. These were planes that the Germans used with single pilot. They were dive bombers that would nosedive and drop a bomb, actually. And if it wasn't for my sister pushing me into the side of the road, into the gully, I would have been shot. Then my father left us, he said, to find a wheelbarrow to carry the suitcases. And he doesn't come back. Either he got lost and didn't abandon us, but my brother thought he abandoned us, but I don't think he did. But we couldn't find him. And it waited till very dark, and we walked on the road. And we stayed in a barn, slept on hay. And in the morning, early morning, they told us there was a train. I don't know why that's in pictures ahead. Go back. Yeah. And we boarded the train just to get away. And the train was heading towards Rouen, which is sort of north of where we were, north of Paris. And I remember being on the train, and suddenly I'm lifted off my feet, and I'm flying across the corridor, and I'm knocked out. And when I regained consciousness, the train had crashed. Do I have another? The train had crashed. Either it was a French sabotage or the Germans had put another train in the tracks, and it crashed. It was considered sabotage. I found an article years later that mentioned the list of the injured. It said there were 53 people who died and about 100 people who were injured. I was listed as an enfant Rotmil right there. Now, my name used to be spelled Rotmil. In fact, if you look at National Geographic, you put down my name, a city comes up in Czechoslovakia called Rotmil. Rotmil, yeah. So we ended up in this hospital called l'Hôtel Dieu de Rouen. Now, the hotel is not a hotel, but that's what in French it means a house of comfort. And it was this is an old medieval drawing of the hospital I was in. And that's a rendering of the hospital. Then from the hospital, a dozen kids of us, about 12 of us, were taken to an island in Brittany, which is way over on the western part of France, North France. And we stayed on the island, and it was run by nuns. It could have been a nunnery, for I don't know, but I think it was just a building. They owned a few buildings on the island. And one day on this island, a bull came loose. from an enclosed area. And we had been building this little huts out of sticks and branches. And the bull was knocking the houses down. And everybody ran away. But I was so angry that I walked towards the bull. And everybody said, come back. But they didn't come after me. They were scared. I went up to the bull with a stick and started hitting him on his backside. I said, Ali, go. And the bull looked at me and then followed. And we just went along. Everyone took him all the way to the gate, opened it up, put him in, and then they came to get me. And I was a hero for the day. Another time, I was on a beach, the tide, and I was fascinated by the little shrimps I found and seashell. And I wasn't aware that the tide was coming in. And suddenly I'm surrounded by water and I ran to shore and there was a wall there. I barely got over the wall and got out of there. That's just innocence of children, you know. Oh, that's a picture, an aerial picture of the island we were in. And it's called Ile de Berder, which means it's Celtic, French Celtic. You have Irish Celtic, you have French Celtic. And Berder means brother. But also, so Ile de Berder, the Isle of Brothers. I've been back there, I've been visiting. It's now, a tourist attraction, famous for oysters and all that. And the only way you can get to the island is to wait for low tide to walk across, otherwise you have to take a boat. Then when France fell, the Germans told everybody, go home now, everything is fine. But it wasn't. The meaning we cannot live under German occupation. And a woman, Madame Gut, who actually was the wife of the finance minister of Belgium, she was a volunteer, drove my brother and I back to we were going to go back, we were going to go to Brussels to find my father, who had disappeared on the road. And on the way, we stopped in a hospital to find mother, and we find out that my mother had died. And then in the train crash, my sister had died. She was very badly injured facially. I saw her alive, but I found out, when I went to the hospital, I found out she died on the scene. Yeah, they said décédé, and my brother said he didn't know what that meant. It's a French word for deceased. And then this is a schematic of I've been back to, whenever I go back to France, I go there because my mother is buried there, so is my sister, in the little cemetery. And then it says Catastrophe de Morny, catastrophe of Morny. And it shows you where the wounded have been. Ironically, on the same cemetery, on the upper right-hand corner on the hill, is another cemetery, Cimetière Allemand, German cemetery. And there you have soldiers from World War I who were buried there. Just the irony of war, it's endless. And then I saw the list, and then my mother is listed here, Madame Rotmil, 40. She was 40 years old. No, wait a minute. Yeah, she was 40 years old, 40 ans. And my sister is on the same list. I have that somewhere. And we moved in with Madame Gut, lived with her for a while. She said we could live with her. And we did, I did. She had a wonderful garden with fruit trees and all that. So for a moment, it was a respite from the war. But where's father? We didn't know what to do. And one day my brother came back and said, guess what? We found father. So we moved in with him. But moving in with him, meant that all of a sudden we didn't have the safeguards that we had before. We didn't have the Red Cross to go around us, but we had, my father was making do what he could. And we told him mother had died and sister, and he accepted that. And then he had to go, even Belgium, which was occupied, had a rule that all the Jews had to be registered. And this is the copy of the register of my uncle, who was my mother's brother, Gottlieb. She was a Gottlieb. And stamped on it is Jew in red. He was a tailor. And this is the kind of propaganda they used to have a caricature of a Jewish man. And who is on his lap? Stalin, Churchill, and Roosevelt. They were considered the three big enemies by the Germans. They made caricatures of them. There was an early, I have this book, it's an early math book, mathematics book that I have, arithmetic. And then my father signing it, saying, oh no, the teacher, I'm very happy with this notebook. And my father says, très bien. Oh no, my father signed it right there, Adolphe Rotmil. And he said, très bien, which is, very good. I'm very proud of that. Everything okay? Yeah. This is the order from given down from the German authorities that Jews were no longer allowed to go to school. Which a lot of kids would think, oh, that's great. But it was very bad. My brother and I went anyway. We would go to school, to classes, but then eventually teachers began to disappear. So we realized it wasn't really safe. We had to leave. Then my brother, I didn't have an identification. In Europe, I think they still do that. You have to have an ID. In this country, you use your driver license, but there's no ID required. But in Europe, they want you to have an ID. So there was this, Leon Leiberg is someone that we know. He's a friend of mine. He lives in Washington. He's around, stamped in red, Juif. And Yud is the Flemish language, because Belgium speaks French and Flemish, which is sort of like Dutch. These were men who walked around, called the Felder Gendarmerie, which is the Kettelhunde. They call them chain dogs, but they wear this plaque, Stadtpolizei, state police. You read the book 1984. Well, this is what it was like. It was just like 1984. Big brother watching you and all that. Then one morning, they were slamming up doors at dawn. The Germans used to, when they would slam out, they would slam all the doors. It would wake me up. It was like 5 in the morning. And there's a man standing over me with a gun, a Luger gun to my head. And he's shouting, aufstehen, get up, runtergehen, go downstairs. So I got up. I barely had time to put on my underwear, and I went to go downstairs. I had my pajamas on and started the interrogated. And the German, I stood there with like a tribunal they set up in the living room, and it said, bist du Jude? Are you a Jew? And I was so trembling. I was so scared of these guys. I didn't say anything. And they threw me out the room. Said, raus, raus. I mean, get out, raus. Just like you see in the movies now. This is a ticket that I found when I went to Auschwitz, where my father was eventually taken. My father was taken and the train he was on, 1,400 or so, it said gazé à l'arrivée, gassed upon arrival. I tried to think how he died, but that's what it is. And this is a ticket for delivery of coal. We were heating the apartment with coal. And there's my father, a record of my father. And what they do on this record, what they used to do, they put the bare minimum. First of all, they spell his name like Hitler, Adolf, with an F. And then Rotmil, that's what he was, that's how we were born, by the name Rotmil. And then the French would say Rotmil. Rotmühl is more of a German, meaning red windmill. Mühl is a Müllerin, is a miller. And it would show all the previous addresses because that way they could go there and raid that building. And this is the list that I found when I went to visit Auschwitz of my father, and he was number 779 on the train. And I think the train, however, I have another, the train, what says Gaziala, so everybody on the train was gassed upon arrival. He was not taken into Auschwitz. When you go to the museum now, you go back to Auschwitz, something like a museum, there's one display of children's clothes that the Germans would recycle. And all that room is filled with shaving brushes. Is that crazy? They were one of the originators of recycling, I guess. And then the gate to Auschwitz said, Abba macht frei, which means work will make you free. And they make it sound like they're going to a work camp. What they intend to have the camp, 100 feet away was the gas chambers. And as you know, there were 6 million Jews who were gassed, including 1 million children who were gassed. People don't realize that. These are the objects that they would take away from the people, the hairbrushes. And I mean, it's so mundane. It's tragic when you look at that. The stuff, your own personal possessions. It makes you cry. I mean, I'm crying when I'm looking at these brushes, when I was there. Even artificial limbs were taken away and either recycled, I don't know what they were doing with those things. Now, the convoy that my father was on, it says that no, it doesn't help. 30%, okay, 30% of the train were matriculated in the camp. The 70% other were gassed upon arrival. Now, when my father was gone, my brother said, you wait here, I'm going to get some help. And he told me to wait on the stoop of my house. And what he did was he went to a church and he spoke to the priest. And the priest said, I can't help you. I'm not equipped, but I know somebody who can. And he led him to a monastery in Louvain, which is another city about 20 miles from Brussels. My brother went there. And he asked for Father Père Bruno Renders, with a monk. And Père Bruno said to him, yes, I can help you. In the end of the war, he hid between 300 and 400 children, finding families to hide them in, to hide the children. So I waited on the stoop. I didn't know where my brother went. And suddenly, that's the house I was in front of. And suddenly Père Bruno appeared. He looked just like that. He was a youngish man in his 30s. And he had asked the abbot at the monastery if he could do this work. He felt there was an injustice being done and he wants to help. And he's known to have hidden. So he's considered one of the just in Israel. And I'm trying to describe what they mean by resistance, which is to resist a secret organization resisting political authority. the underground. You have that now in Ireland. You have things like that. The Irish, not resistance. You're resisting authority. And then you work underground. So sometimes it's called the underground. And Père Bruno is considered a member of the underground. And here's a woman, this is a photograph I just wanted to show you. They know that she was part of the underground. And behind her, you see a German officer, just to show you how close you were to danger, you know. But she volunteered. This is a photograph taken of Père Bruno with 4 other children. I'm not in that picture. And well, we consider him a holy man. There he is. He was a scholar. He read in Hebrew books. He read Latin. I mean, he was just brilliant. And I remember telling him that I wanted to become a monk. And he said, no, you wait till you're old enough to make a decision. But I wanted to be, he didn't try to convert me. There's a book by Martin Gilbert, a wonderful book called The Righteous, which is about the people who did, I recommend this book to read. It's about the people who took a risk of hiding Jews, and they're considered the righteous, written by Martin Gilbert. I went to a book signing of his and met this man. So Mr. Père Bruno went to Monsieur Loix. How are we doing on time?
We're doing very well.
Okay, we went to Monsieur Loix, who was a professor at the University of Louvain. And he went to him and he said, I have a child who, through no fault of his own, is being persecuted. I need to find someone to hide him. Can you take him? After a long silence, Madame Loix said, when are you bringing him?
And they saved you.
I don't know why that gets me. But thanks. Thank you. Okay, I'll go on. I'm sorry. Now, at one point with the Loix family, it was getting dangerous to live in the city of Louvain. We're being bombed by the Germans. I mean, we were lucky that the house we were in, a bomb fell right nearby. We ended up moving to a chateau from the Whitmans, who were, Mrs. Loix went to school with Whitman's wife. You understand those kind of things? She married a rich guy. So we ended up going to the chateau. And then all of a sudden, I'm like in a new kind of playground. You know, it's the war, but I'm in the chateau. And me and the other, you can see all the other, they had their own 5 children of their own. They even had a nanny, Italian woman. So I stayed there and it was peaceful for a while. I had water. Thank you, man. Got water all over the place. Now, this is the monastery from Père Bruno. I've been back there also. Now, the monastery were considered more or less a refuge. The Germans, you know, but sometimes they didn't care. They would go in there and break windows and arrest some of the monks if they find that they're doing, hiding Jews. But I go back, it becomes really a pilgrimage for me. And there was a statue of the Virgin holding the Christ in her arms. During the war, a bomb fell and the head came off the statue, was put back on. But if you stand by it, you can see the city of Louvain below because the monastery is up on top. It's great. I don't know if you have this experience of going back to places of your childhood, that are like sacred, But that was just like in the middle of the war. You also have miraculous things happening. That was a picture that Père Bruno took of my brother and I. Now, my brother was 16 at the time, and I was 10. Yeah, I was 10. I was 14 when I came to this country. 4 years later, I'm on a ship. This is inside the monastery, still like that. This is where the monks walk around in a circle, praying, you know, all day long praying. And that's why Father Bruno thought he wants to do more than just pray. He wants to help out with things, you know. It's one thing to lead a monastic life, but you want to. This is the refectory where the monks ate. And the first day I came there, they sat me down on one of those benches and I had a bowl of soup. But usually you're not allowed in there. It's just for the monks. And this particular order had a vow of silence. You try not to speak for one day. I mean, but they couldn't talk. And if they had to say something, they had to go to the abbot and say, Father Morelius is bothering me, you know. Can you tell him to stop this? Okay. Blowing his nose every minute. I went to sit at the same table that I sat when Père Bruno took me to the monastery. And I became an instant Catholic. Within a week, I attended a Catholic school. And, you know, I ate it up. I loved the whole religion. I thought it was great. And one time I was in a class and I was praying. I really was praying. I mean, I was praying for me. I was going, and I was praying for my mother, I was praying for my brother, and all that. And at one point, I looked up, and then the nun is looking at me, and the kids are lined up to leave. I was still praying, and she said, "You see that? That's how I want you to pray." I became a model Catholic. But because I meant it, you know what I mean? I was really, I thought, it's great. You mean you can pray? I didn't know there was anybody to talk to. I even became an acolyte, even for Père Bruno. You know, monks are priests. He's a priest. A monk is a priest. They have to do a mass every day. So we used to be, we would set up over the mantelpiece and with the Bible on one side, and he would tell me what to do. And he would be praying, and then suddenly he would say, take the book, bring it to the other side. And then he said, kneel, kneel. And then I would bring the book, I would kneel on the other side. And then he had a little gun on the altar. And years later, I asked him, what was that gun? Oh, that was my sister's house, and I found the gun. It's a lady's gun. They use it for a jealous husband or something. And I said, but what do you want? Well, just in case. But it wouldn't do much good if the Germans came in with machine guns, you know. Yeah, the small gun on the altar. No, this is, I'm jumping ahead here. This is Ostende, which is a sea city, an ocean city in Belgium. Ostende, 1945, this is after the war. And I'm in there somewhere. Let's see, where am I? Oh, they're right there. I'm on the second row in the back, third person from the right. And right there, you can see that, yeah. And my brother must be in there too somewhere. I don't see him. I don't see him in this picture. So I became an acolyte. And one time I did perform a Christian act. I walked into a room. I was very taken in with the humility of you know, in the Jews, you have a tooth for a tooth, you know, an eye for an eye. But in the Christian, it was turn the other cheek. And I was very impressed by that you don't just hit the guy back, but you say, hit me over here now. So one time, I walked into a room and a kid was very angry at another kid. He took his coat off the hanger and threw it on the floor. So I came over, picked up the coat and put it back on the hanger. And they looked at me like I was Jesus. You know what I mean? And I thought that's what Jesus would do. So I became a real I was more of a Christian than some of the Christians were there, you know. Yeah, then when the the Americans came had landed, you know, in northern France, they were coming to liberate Belgium. There were two Germans soldiers who were, when I look back now, they were boys. They were like maybe 18 years old, but they had rifles. And they took us all down from the chateau and lined us up against the wall. I thought they were going to execute us, but they didn't. They didn't. But they took our bicycles. And the last I saw of the Germans, the one off the horizon with my bicycle, and the other German. It was really, when you think back now, pathetic in a way that they were leaving they had no chance, you know. But I call it near execution. And then there was liberation, you know, the headline. And I remember seeing, being on the road, the bells, all the church bells rang all day long. And went on the road and I stood there looking at the tanks come by. Now, years ago, when I came to this country, I didn't speak English, and I was in a class, and I wrote an essay that my teacher read in class. She was very moved by it, and I called it was supposed to be the most memorable day of your life. Some people wrote the day I went to see the Statue of Liberty. I wrote down the day the tanks came. And she read it with tears in her eyes, and the tanks came. So, but I said, well, yeah, I mean, that was a great day. And they were throwing candy out of the doors for us. I don't see it now. Of course, even though Belgium was liberated, there was still a war going on. And we were following it on the radio, the BBC. Because, you know, during the war, you couldn't listen to the radio. You know, but then you had to have a radio in the basement, but you could get arrested for listening. And there was a BBC, BBC. Even to this day, I love to hear the BBC because it reminded me, particularly there was no FM radio. It was sort of like static, you know. Oh, finally, we were all, I was in a kind of a group home where a lot of us were orphans, and a monk came by, and somehow to the Americans, he filled his garment with lifesaver rolls. And he went around each of us, and he took a lifesaver out of his arm and put it in front of us. And before you know, the whole table, it was like the miracle of the bread. You know, it was another Jesus act. But instead of bread, it was lifesavers. And we hadn't had any candy during the war. There was no such thing as candy, or particularly chocolate, forget it. So this was like a miracle. And to this day, I can't look at the lifesaver straight in the face. And I think there's a thing about the green, there's always a green one under the green. I don't know if that's true or not. But I buy it once in a while. But I had a volley of, I bring a vote to class once in a while. So 1944, Belgium is liberated. And like I said, we went on the road to look at the tanks coming in. And I leave the Loix family, who had hidden me. And to this day, I'm still in touch with their children. You know, Chantal, as one of the girls, calls me, you know. And we moved to Namur, and Namur is a city in Belgium where Père André was another priest and other survivors, and stayed with them at that family. And then I had dinner with the troops. And that was interesting because they had this, what they call the Slater system. Anybody know what that is? when you go to a cafeteria and you see a mound of potatoes, it's called a Slater system. And I'd never seen anything like that. Later, I would like if I got half a potato. This was a mound of potato. And they would fill up and say, yes, this and that. Yeah. To this day, I love to go to this kind of cafeterias. I think it's a great word. I mean, unheard of. And that's a photograph in the group home. And my brother is the guy looking angrily at me. I don't know why, but I'm on the left-hand corner. And I was given a suit. You know, I should mention, was that the point where I get the shoes? Or was that later? I think it was later. I'll tell you that story. Now, Aufbau is a German language newspaper, Jewish German language, which is still in existence. Aufbau means construction. Bauen is to build. Aufbau is construction. And in it, they had a page that said gesucht wird, meaning being searched. And they would put names of family, would put names of people. And someone found our name there. It was my aunt and uncle in Peekskill, New York, who had put an ad. And then they wrote Rotmil survivors, and we answered back, and that's how we got to come here. I blew it up, gesucht wird, search, being searched. And then it tells you Coptic Yidden, it gives you instruction in German. Because German and Yiddish are very similar languages. You know, it's like Harlem English. And then coming to the New World. And to make my, well, before I mentioned it, the ship came on the Ile-de-France, which is a beautiful ship, and had a Baroque. We slept in steerage way down below on mattresses on the floor, but during the day, I would go to the dining room. And even just the other day, I had an artichoke because they served me an artichoke and I didn't know what to do with it. I had no clue. I tried everything I could. So what do you eat? I couldn't figure it out. So it was like a different world, you know.
Don't forget the shoes.
Yeah. So I don't know what to mean my aunt. Oh yeah. So to the paper we made a contact, and then I mean, you know how difficult it is. You know, the immigrants. I was an immigrant. I'm sympathetic. Catherine is not sympathetic to immigrants, but I am sympathetic. I was an immigrant. Most of the people in this country are descendant of immigrants. You know, so the New World. You know, I crossed the Atlantic, Ile-de-France, and came into New York, and it was like a fantasy. You know. That's a painting. I was trying to find. I couldn't find a picture. That's a picture of me on my visa paper. I was 14 years old. You can't see it. And that's a picture that Pepperino took of us. So I arrived in Peekskill, New York. It's Back to the Future shock. You know, to go from war-devastated, war, traumatized. Everywhere I looked at on application, it says traumatized. I don't know what that meant. But I come to Peekskill, which is like made out of cardboard paper, you know. And so the first day, the essay, the memorable day, the day the tanks came. And there's a picture of me in a chemistry class about to blow something up. I mean, you should never put someone who can't speak English in the laboratory. I had a Bunsen burner. I don't know, test tubes. It was just, but I had a good time there. I loved it. Yeah, I'm constantly searching the meaning. There's even a book called In Search of Meaning. Mm-hmm. And the Holocaust, the black hole of the 20th century, Elie Wiesel. You know, one time I went to a conference and Elie Wiesel was there, and they put me next to him. So you got to meet this guy. So I sit down and we're talking, and I realized who he was. And then I said, you know, this is written up in a Bangor paper, this story. I told him, I said, I don't really feel like a survivor. I'm like you know, you were in the camp and everything. And he said, they murdered your family and you were forced into hiding. You're a survivor. And he straightened me out. And then the Bangor paper reporter wrote that up. It was fantastic. And he did that. Oh, I wrote to the Red Cross to get detail of the train crash that I was in. Yeah, I mentioned that, right? And they said, we have no record of it. I just wanted to show the irony of research, you know. I wrote to the Comité Général de la Croix-Rouge, nothing, but I remember the Red Cross being there. Wherever you have anything, the Red Cross is right there. It's an international organization. And then even it took me a while. I find now when you look it up, Morny-la-Pommeraye, it's online, the accident. It tells you exactly what's going on. I went back to Belgium, to Mrs. and Mrs. Loix, who had hidden me, with my son Adam, who thanked them for saving me. Generations. And they were very appreciative. But by this time, he had Alzheimer's, he didn't know who I was. But maybe he did, I don't know, but Anna, she was telling me they both died, you know, and passed away. But it was good that I had my son meet them to thank them. There's no end to the courage. I mean, in Israel, they are the just. I saw Père Bruno till he died in 1979. Loix died in 1999. Hélène Loix died in 2000. Both were 93. My brother died in June 2011. He was 82 or 84. 84. Which was a shock to me that my brother died. So I'm the only living member. But I created 22 other people. So, right? Am I right? 22,
4
24.
children and
Yeah.
numerous grandchildren.
Yeah, 4 children. So, in revenge, you know, make up for it. Mr. Loix was decorated. Not just, he had other things that he did. He was actually a Greek origin, Loix. And he did a lot of stuff with, I think he, in Dubai, I think he started the, what do you call it, the system for toilets and stuff, what do you call it? When you put pipes down and all that.
Oh, sewage. Sewage.
Huh?
Sewage.
No, not so. It's in a better word than that. The system in the city, you have to have it.
Sanitation.
But the Israel honored them. They considered it just. Andre Lurks, and there was a ceremony for them. I couldn't go to Israel at the time. That's Père Bruno when I visited him years later. And he, as an older man, but he had a very beatific feeling to him. I felt he was very humble, you know. And we kid around. And you know what? It's funny. He said, I have something special for you that my cook made for you. And out came, there's a thing I don't know if you've ever seen blood sausages. You know, gross. But apparently I must have liked it at some point. But I didn't then, and I had to force myself to eat them. To make them, but he thought it was doing me a favor. It's like the time I went to Brittany, and this woman who was my host opened up oysters all over the place. And I'm surrounded by 12 oysters open. I had to force myself to eat them all. You know, and you eat them, you swallow them. Do you like oysters? There's a grave of Père Bruno, very simple. They're all monks. No fancy monuments or anything. Very humble. And I once, when I'm there, I would visit it. You know, I've been to it back and when I was there. So no, I think I have this. This is a clock in Paris, I think. Yeah, and you go to, it's a restaurant built behind the clock. And they're just talking about time passing. This pond is in Auschwitz, is where they dump the ashes of the victims. So it's become now a memorial site. And I go there, and when I went there, I was paying homage to my father. It's in there somewhere. On his ashes. Oh yeah, during the war, someone gave me a harmonica, and I played a song which, ironically, the Germans.
You get ready. I'm going to
Yeah.
stop the share. Yeah.
The Germans play. It's a children's song, and it's a song that says, "Ich hatte eine Kamerade, besser findest du nicht." How's your German? I had a friend, better you cannot find. Ich hatte eine Kamera. It's like a children's song. It's very simple. But I'll play it for you to end my talk with. Backwards. Thank you very much, everybody. I'm all done. Can you hear?
Anyone have any questions for Charles?
Can you hear? Did you hear the playing?
Actually, we did not hear the harmonica very well.
What's that?
I'm sorry to say.
Didn't hear the harmonica that well, they said.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You want to play again, or you can't fix that?
Why do you think that was, Brian? No, I think we should skip that.
Yeah, okay.
Charles,
Oh, yeah.
I have a question for you. Something you said early in the talk struck me, and it was when you said, question what you hear and doubt what you see.
What you see.
Oh, yeah.
Can you expound on that for our audience?
You couldn't trust anything anymore. There was so much propaganda. You didn't know truth from lies. You know, so the safer thing is to not believe what you see and not trust what you hear. And I remember there used to be something they used to tell me, and to this day, when I hear politicians talk, I have the same attitude. I don't believe what he's saying. Or I don't, not 100%. And I think it was Henry Thoreau who said, follow your own drummer, right? He said, follow your conscience. You have to decide what's true. But because I've become hardened about truth, because I've been lied to so much. Like Goebbels who said, make the lie big enough and they'll believe you. He admitted that you can tell lies to people, make it big enough, and they'll believe you. And I think politicians tend to do that.
Thank you. Are there
Yeah.
other questions in the audience here?
Hello. I just wanted to say thank you for sharing your story, and I admire your perseverance. I was curious, after your experience, if you picked up any hobbies that helped you get through those times.
He wants to know what hobbies you picked up to help you get through that.
What one?
Hobbies, like your painting. He wants to know what hobbies
like
you
painting
picked up.
or artwork
Yeah,
or
yeah.
music?
And photography.
Well,
yeah.
the war was one hobby I took up. No, I didn't. Well, I like to play chess. I play online. If any of you want to find me on chessworld.com, you can take me on. So I find chess is a good way to meet someone, and then I do it online. We can talk, we chat back and forth, and I'm playing people from all over the world, China, everywhere, Brazil, and so that's one. That's the only hobby I really have. I played music. Um,
Photography.
I think I like to read. Books is a big thing for me, and I'm working on a book about my life. So reading is very important. In terms of physical stuff, I say I like to walk, but that's about it. But as a kid, I used to push iron. I used to lift weights and stuff. But I don't do like stamp collecting and stuff. I don't have the patience. Although I believe in once in a while I will save a stamp, but I'm not a stamp collector. But yeah, that's it.
Thank you. More questions, audience? Looks like we don't have any more questions here, Heidi.
Okay.
Well, if you have any follow-up on email, you can email me.
Great. Thank you.
Students have questions. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Dr. Avery, for handling things there. To those of you in my class who participated, as well as others, I really appreciate it. Charles has really enjoyed sharing his story with you. So we are going to sign off from here in Portland. And thanks again for your time and your attention. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, Heidi. Thank you.
Thank you. They're clapping. You can't hear them, but they're clapping.
Thank you all for your attendance tonight. That concludes our program, and I think we'll all go from here changed people. Thank you again.